Breaking news. Giorgia Meloni just striked back at Emmanuel Macron and half of Brussels is in total shock. For years, EU bureaucrats treated Meloni like a problem child, a fluke, someone they could lecture, sideline or quietly bully back into line. And Macron was right there with them. But this time, she didn't blink. She drew a line and made it crystal clear. Italy is not a doormat, not a footnote, and not a nation that can be pushed around however the elites desire, especially when dignity and sovereignty are on the line. And that's when everything changed. So here's what actually happened. What lit the fuse was a deal Brussels had been obsessing over for decades, the EU-Mercosur trade pact. One of those glossy, elite-approved agreements everyone was supposed to clap for and move on. Macron wanted it wrapped up, signed, celebrated, big speeches, big smiles, historic moment vibes. But then Meloni slammed the brakes. No grandstanding, no theatrics, just a flat, icy no. She made it clear Italy wasn't signing off on a deal that would undercut its farmers, flood markets, and sacrifice national interests just so Brussels could tick a box. And that's when the mood shifted, because this wasn't just a policy disagreement. This was Meloni openly refusing to play her assigned role. In that moment, it stopped being about trade and turned into a power struggle. This is where it stopped being polite and started getting personal, because Macron has never hidden what he thinks of Meloni. To him, she's the outsider, the wrong accent, the wrong politics, the wrong background, not polished enough, not European enough in the way Brussels likes. You could feel the sneer every time Paris talked about Rome, that quiet assumption that she'd eventually fall in line once the adults spoke firmly enough. Meloni saw it for what it was, and she wasn't having it. She pushed back hard, basically saying, this is Italy's call, not yours, not Brussels. And definitely not the dinner party class that's never had to answer to farmers, workers or small towns. She called out the double standards straight up, how leaders like her get treated like a risk, while the same old elite voices get endless patience and praise no matter how badly they mess up. And then she flipped the script. She didn't frame herself as the problem. She framed herself as the voice they keep trying to shut out, the voters they ignore, the people who don't get a seat at those shiny EU tables. And that's when Macron realised this wasn't just resistance. This was defiance. And here's where it gets concrete, because this wasn't just vibes or imagined disrespect. Macron showed it. In the run-up to the trade talks, his camp kept floating the idea that Italy was being emotional, that Rome needed to be guided toward the right European position. One French official even brushed off Italy's objections as domestic posturing, like Meloni was some loud regional politician playing to the crowd instead of a head of government making a sovereign call. That's the sneer right there. The assumption that when France raises concerns, it's statesmanship, but when Italy does it, it's noise. Macron spoke about needing serious, responsible leadership to finish the deal, which in Brussels speak is basically, why is she being difficult? No names mentioned, of course. They never say it straight, but everyone in the room knew exactly who he meant. Meloni clocked it instantly, and instead of swallowing it like past Italian leaders might have done, she snapped back, calmly, publicly, and very deliberately. She made it clear Italy wasn't dragging its feet, wasn't sabotaging Europe, and wasn't asking for special treatment. She was asking for equal respect, same protections, same patience. France gets every single time it says, not yet. And that's what really rattled Macron. Because she wasn't yelling, she wasn't posturing, she was calling out the hierarchy, the unspoken rule that some countries lead and others are expected to nod along. By doing that, she wasn't just blocking a deal. She was challenging the whole pecking order, and Brussels does not like being reminded of that. But here's the part most people miss. This tension didn't start yesterday. This wasn't Meloni suddenly acting out. This goes back years, and the first real crack showed during the Ukraine troop scandal. When Macron floated the idea of sending Western troops into Ukraine, he did it in that familiar French way. Vague enough to sound bold, dramatic enough to dominate headlines. Big statements, lots of ambiguity, everyone else left to clean up the fallout. Italy didn't play along. Meloni's camp made it clear. No Italian troops, no backroom escalation, no games. That alone already put her on the wrong side of Paris. But then it escalated. A senior Italian figure openly challenged Macron's stance, calling it reckless and destabilising. France didn't brush it off. They summoned Italy's ambassador to Paris, a move you don't make unless you're trying to send a message. That was France saying, know your place. And then came the moment that really burned. At a major European summit, Macron and a select group of leaders jumped on a private call about Ukraine. Italy, one of Europe's largest countries, wasn't included. No explanation, no apology, just quietly sidelined. Meloni's response was ice cold. She went public and doubled down. Italy would not send troops. Period. No hedging, no diplomatic fog. It was her way of saying, you don't get to decide for us and you don't get to pretend we weren't in the room. From that moment on, the tone changed. This stopped being policy disagreement and became something else entirely. A power struggle between an old EU hierarchy and a leader who refused to act like a junior partner, and everything that followed, the trade fight, the public clashes, the open defiance, grew out of that first break. That was the warning shot. And once that line was crossed, things didn't cool down. They snowballed. Because when power struggles don't get resolved quietly, they come out sideways. And the next flashpoint wasn't about tanks or troops. It was about money. Out of nowhere, a senior French minister went public accusing Italy of fiscal dumping. Translation, France was basically saying Italy was cheating, slashing taxes, luring businesses away and playing dirty inside the EU. It wasn't said quietly in a meeting. It was said out loud, on the record, for everyone to hear. Rome took that as a straight-up insult. Meloni's team didn't hide behind polite language or diplomatic fluff. They fired back immediately, calling the accusation unfounded, dishonest, and politically motivated. Italian officials went on television, hit social media, and made it clear they weren't going to accept lectures from Paris about how to run their economy. And that's what really annoyed Macron's camp, because this wasn't just about tax rules. It was about hierarchy. France is used to setting the tone, pointing fingers and having everyone else quietly nod along. Italy didn't nod. Italy pushed back. Publicly. To Brussels insiders, this was Meloni breaking etiquette. To her supporters, it was long overdue. She wasn't just defending tax policy. She was defending Italy's right to compete, to grow and to make choices without being branded a villain every time Paris feels threatened. From that moment on, the gloves were off. The relationship wasn't tense anymore, and it was openly confrontational. And by the time the trade deal fight rolled around, both sides already knew this wasn't about one policy. This was about who gets to call the shots in Europe. And that's the heart of it. This isn't just one trade deal, one tax spat, or one diplomatic row. It's a shift in power Brussels doesn't want to see. For decades, France and Germany spoke. Everyone else followed. Italy played quietly. That era is over. Meloni has made it clear she won't be managed, corrected or talked down to. Every jab and on troops, taxes or trade is met with a sharp public pushback. Macron sees disruption. Meloni sees respect. Two worldviews heading straight for collision. So what happens next? Europe either adapts to a new balance where countries like Italy demand equal footing, or this rivalry gets louder, uglier and far more public. Meloni isn't backing down and Macron isn't used to being challenged like this. If Italy can say no and survive, who's next? This fight is only just getting started.